For me, the next generation of activity schedules, which keep in mind we sometimes call embedding schedules, ELO matrix, an activity schedule matrix, activity matrix. So there's again lots of different names, but yet another name, if you will, is this thing that we've been calling a power pack. And it's really thinking about the intentional instruction. So as we left off the previous recording talking about how activity schedules had evolved from identifying teachable moments to identifying what we were teaching to really focusing on how we would teach, the Power Pack brings all of that together and facilitates ways to distribute trials across the daily routine without having to create an actual matrix. So I'll get to that part here in a minute, but conceptually, let's just walk through it. So why the evolution? Why another generation? As we've thought about the needs of learners, and as you've heard me say before, all learners are a triangle. That means that regardless of my ability or disability, I am a single child and I can be learning common outcomes, targeted outcomes, and highly individualized outcomes, all as the same unit, all as the same child. I don't only have intensive needs, and I don't always have just common outcomes that I'm ready to learn. Depending on the circumstances, the outcome itself, the situation, the demands, the day, I will vary in terms of the amount of instruction I need. So this figure, once again, comes from a joint paper on response to intervention in early childhood by the Division for Early Childhood, the National Association for the Education of Young Children, and the National Head Start Association, and really trying to emphasize that what changes across the tiers is what we are teaching. But once we've identified what to teach, we also have to think about when, where, the materials, and how we teach. This is another illustration of a tiered way of looking at instruction. It can be quite overwhelming, in fact. But if you can kind of orient your eyes to this top left, then to the bottom, and then over to the right. The idea is that we consider what to teach at Tier 1, which would be a common outcome, what to teach at Tier 2 for children who are struggling or whose development is stalled, which is a different outcome, and then what to teach for individual children that is a highly specific response identified by the team. We then decide when, where, and what to teach with, and that is constant for all children. The only reason we add the when, the where, and the with what again down here is because children need multiple opportunities when they are struggling or when their development is stalled. We don't include additional opportunities at Tier 3 because this should be constant. Children need many dosages, many learning trials, and so this has to be across every single activity throughout the day. So the how to teach, the instructional sequence, and of course how we give children feedback, which is a critical component to learning, is different than how we may teach a targeted outcome, and is certainly different than how we teach and consecrate an individualized learning outcome. So this is again just a bigger way of looking at tiered instruction, but you might be wondering, how does this have anything to do with an activity schedule? But the idea is, instead of really making it on the matrix, we convert the matrix, either one we've planned in our minds or ones that we've planned as a group, as identifying a teachable moment, and we can then do multiple learning opportunities across those teachable moments. And so if you want to pause the recording for a minute and click on this link, it'll take you to another video that talks a little bit more and gives you a video illustration of the Power Packs as they exist today in a paper format. And so what we're really thinking about is that if I am teaching labeling at story time in the book area with these materials, how might I teach them? And so the way that a Power Pack works is that each of these columns, if you can kind of isolate them in your mind for a minute, can flip, can turn over, can change. And so I can hold labeling steady, but I can change the when, the where, and the with what. I might even hold the how to teach labeling constant. Or I can keep all the first 4 columns constant and change from novelty to brainstorming to self-talk to asking questions. I might leave everything the same, but only change the when I teach. So if you're thinking back to the activity schedules, it's sort of this notion of bringing the best of all three worlds together. We've identified teachable moments, that's the when and the where. We've identified what children are learning, that's the what. And we've identified the adult action, and that's the how. And we've put them into a teaching sequence or into a power pack, and that these can flip, change, and on the fly create learning opportunities that don't have to be pre-planned in terms of by the team. The Power Pack itself are pre-created by a team of us who've been working on these. Eventually, we hope to have an app that will do this for us, but right now on paper. So all we have to do is take our Power Pack with us to the block area, to the book area, to the kitchen area, to the outdoor area, to whatever activity is going on, and there'll be literally hundreds of different combinations of ways we can teach this. Now this becomes important as we take on consultative roles, as we become moving towards ensuring that children are in the least restrictive environment. We still have to ensure that they get the dosages, the instruction, the purposeful instruction that they need, whether it be tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. So these power packs allow us to deliver to another adult with very little teaming time how they might deliver instruction across tiers, across children, across activities. So we really think about these 5 steps. We think about, do we understand what children are learning? This is an example of what to teach at tier 1, which would be state standards, developmentally appropriate practice guidelines. Many of you know the work around the big ideas for early learning. But this could also be replaced with IFSP or IEP outcomes. So what we want children to learn could be those things that they're struggling with or where they've stalled, and or highly specific or individualized outcomes as well. When to teach, again, this is the very first phase of the activity schedules in its evolution, which was just considering the time of day. Which routines? During a transition, was it going to be delivered, this embedding opportunity, was it going to be delivered at the start of an activity, at the end, when the child was with other adults? So really this idea of when is a good match? When is the child engaged? And when does it make sense to teach this learning outcome? We also want to think about where to deliver the instruction. And again, as an itinerant or as a consultant or even in a co-teaching arrangement, we need to be thinking about all types of spaces where the instruction can be delivered. All too often, we bring the child to us, to our room, to our table, to our activity, whatever it is where we have sort of this idea that teaching is going to be delivered, versus being able to follow the child around and deliver the instruction where they are. So instead of trying to convince a child that they want to play with us, we figure out where they want to play, and then we go to them and deliver the instruction. So this Power Pack allows us to carry the instruction with us, follow the child, and then deliver it where they're interested. It also makes us think really long and hard about the materials. Things that will either support learning, things that will distract from learning, things that will ensure children remain engaged. And so it really forces us to think broadly about the types of materials that we have. And if things aren't available in a particular classroom, this might be the first place we begin, is having a conversation with our community partners in terms of why we have the toys we have, why we have the materials that we have, why we want to encourage children to explore and to do things in ways that may not be expected with materials. But sometimes we have to have a conversation like around loose parts. How are loose parts a productive and important material that we use when we create learning opportunities? And that the materials was kind of lost in the earlier iterations of activity schedules. You know, even if we identified a teachable moment, if we didn't have the materials there to support the learner, the teachable moment could be lost. When we started thinking about child outcomes, it could have been something that we could have taught, but we again didn't have the right materials to support multiple opportunities for the child to do the target skill in a variety of ways. So it became very unidimensional, very, here's the material, here's the puzzle, put it together, we check off your IEP goal, versus if the child's going to manipulate a variety of objects, do we have a variety of objects across the routine of the day that can be manipulated? And then certainly thinking about where and how the adult is going to use those materials. Are they going to model? Are they going to allow children to be creative with the materials? Is there going to be one way you can interact with materials? Or is this a time for exploration? So this is a part to the old activity schedules that sort of was lost. There wasn't a deep enough conversation about the materials that are really there to support learning. And then the last part is the how to teach, the evidence-based strategies that we want to use to create the opportunity for a child to practice, whether it be a tier 1, a tier 2, or tier 3. Now, as an itinerant or coach or consultant, this is really important because many times a strategy is a perfect strategy and we tell somebody, here's the best strategy ever. But unless they truly understand how to implement the strategy, it will not go anywhere. It'll fall flat, if you will, or people will say, I tried that and it didn't work, or it'll seem too hard and they'll wait for the expert, which is often maybe you, to come into the room or into the environment to then deliver the instruction, that it couldn't be something that we could do on our own. So much of what we need to do is spend time talking about what strategy is a good match for the outcome, which strategy is both effective and efficient. So if I want something as an outcome for the child, which is a very child-initiated behavior, something that I want the child to start to do on their own, to begin, then I need to have a role that is a little more passive. I, as the adult, need to be the responder so that children can initiate. Conversely, if I'm really looking for a very specific child behavior that the adult has selected, that the adult initiates, then I need to use strategies that are very adult mediated, where the adult is the initiator and the child is the responder. Many times I might need to type out these steps. So if I'm going to use a milieu teaching strategy and I'm going to do a MAND, people might need to say, give me an example. Give me 5 examples. Tell me exactly what I say, how long I wait, and what I do based upon what the child does. So if I want a child to say a single word and I say to the child, tell me more, and I don't wait, I just go, tell me more, say more, you want more. There's no space in there for the kid. So even though they are in the responder mode, we need to wait a set amount of time, and that needs to maybe be a constant or a progressive amount of time. But those are discussions that we have with the other adults on the teaching team, which is, what is the strategy? What are the steps to delivering the strategy? Have I delivered the strategy with fidelity? And so sometimes on a visit, when a coach or a consultant or an itinerant teacher visits a community classroom or teaching environment, it may not be work with the child at all. It may be very well that you work with the other adults to make sure that they are implementing the effective and the efficient strategy with fidelity. So again, the Power Pack ends with this evidence-based how to teach section, and it will give hundreds of ideas of what adults can say and do to teach both child-initiated types of behaviors as well as very specific adult-selected behaviors. So if you'd like to learn more about this next generation of activity schedules, you can certainly join our Power Pack portal. It's an online learning community. All of the resources there are free. They get updated as often as there's time to update them. We also have a Facebook group if you're interested in just kind of alerts and different resources that can help you really think about how can I, with minimal planning, with very little adult-to-adult interaction time, ensure that children's outcomes, whether they be IEP goals or just opportunities to learn state standards, how can I ensure that with my community partners and teaching teams that instruction is being delivered with fidelity, and that there are these evidence-based strategies that we know work, that can be delivered when it's a teachable moment, in locations where children are engaged, and with materials that support their needs.